Hey, this is SportsSlaw with Lomas Brown, the pro.
And Deb Schneider, I'm the prof. And together, we're the pro and the prof. Welcome to SportsSlaw Year in Review, 2020 in Review. And Lomas, I don't even know where to begin.
Goodness. If we would have known back in March that 2020 was going to end up this way, Deb. I mean, let me ask you a question. What would you have done different if you'd have known that this was going to happen back in March? What would have been the one thing you think you would have done differently?
From a sports perspective, a podcast perspective?
Let's say from a life perspective.
From a life perspective.
Because that will incorporate everything, sports, everything. What do you think might have been the one thing you would have did differently?
I think I would have tried to basically, I mean, if I knew, I would have been more prepared. I think that's really the big thing. And I think in a lot of ways, we as a society have really moved forward in a lot of ways. I mean, we pivoted so quickly. Mm-hmm. We really did. And from the businesses, the small businesses, all of that, I'd like to say I would support small business more.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Absolutely support small business more. We try to do the best we can. I think that's really the one area that we could do more, because most people work in small business.
Mm-hmm. No, so, you're right.
You're right. Shout out to all of our workers, our frontline workers.
Yes.
And I include everybody in the hospital, in the medical profession. I include the teachers in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think for me, Deb, I probably would have been communicating with me. That would have been my biggest thing, and what I mean by that is, the outreach of, say, people I hadn't talked to in a long time, people that I haven't met or been hesitant about meeting or communicating with. I just think it would have took on a bigger role for me because of what has happened. Because like you saying, us getting isolated, us being
Absolutely.
Shut down and not being able to communicate the way that human beings are supposed to communicate. Because yes, we communicate through speech and through talk, but also it's through our emotions too.
Mm-hmm.
We communicate. And I just think being, like I say, shut in and not being able to get around people, not being able to gather, I think that probably would have been the one thing for me that I would have looked at a lot harder before this pandemic started.
Would have realized how lucky we actually were, huh?
Absolutely. Exactly. How valuable, how needed it is to be around people and to have those communication skills and just the feel being around each other. Deb, it's hard
right.
when you're doing it virtually or you're doing it through the way we're doing it now. As you recall, me and you started off doing this show being around each other, being face to face, sitting in the same room, being able to share ideas.
We were feeding off of each other.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask you this. Let me ask you this. What is the one thing that you think has been really good about this year?
I hate to say this, but for me, it's kind of been the isolation and this, because now it makes me appreciate when we get out of this, Deb, believe me, I'm going to appreciate social gatherings. I'm going to appreciate being around family. It's different things like that I will appreciate more than I think I did before all this happened. You take a lot of things for granted, and I think I took a lot of things for granted, not calling people back on a timely manner,
Mhm.
You know, like I say, staying out of contact with loved ones for months, you know, like that. I don't think that's going to happen again, because now you see how precious it is. And for some of those loved ones, they need it. Especially, I talked to my
Yes.
96-year-old auntie, 96,
96.
and I
Mhm.
talked to her. She's down in Tallahassee, Florida. And she was just telling me, when this is over with, and she's telling me this at 96, you got to bring the kids down, because some of my kids have never met her.
Oh,
Or she doesn't know a lot of my kids. She know my older kids, but she don't even know my younger kids. So, you know, things like that, being able
mhm.
to gather, I think that's something that I'm gonna really, really appreciate once we're able to do it safely again.
So it's appreciated. I think one of the things that's been, despite the COVID, and it really does go to the isolation though, but a good thing from all of this has been the number of guests and the contacts and the communication we've had. When I look at this, when we started in March, we were saying, oh, how do we get so and so to come to a studio? Where are we going to do this? Where are we going to do this? And I'm going down our list of guests, and I'm going to turn this. I'm going to say, we never would have gotten Rob Parker, who's
Mhm.
in Los Angeles. We never would have gotten some of these people, because it's become easier in a lot of
Yes.
ways.
Yes.
So while we're in a split screen and we're doing this, but I look at this, Doc R, Rodney Road.
Yes. Hmm.
He's in Texas.
That's right.
I and how lucky we've been to be able to have Doc R as, as our resident physician. Dr.
Mhm.
Durbin, she's
Mhm.
out of Johns Hopkins. Joe Franco, we got a number of your former teammates together.
Yes.
I mean, I'm just going down this list, and you and I were talking
Yeah.
about that before. I want to
Hmm.
name everybody: Matt Friedman, Matt Cook. We started with the Matts,
Yes.
Terry Kalna. I, you know, um, just just a phenomenal group of guests that we've had in 6-7 months.
Yeah, no, you're right. Now, I hate to say this part too, but I guess COVID gave us a lot to talk about too, Deb. If you think about it, it was like
Yes,
something almost every day that changed or that was affected by COVID. And, you know, it gave us a lot to talk with. We could go to indie industry. It affected any industry, the sports industry, construction, just any, how you teach now, just
yes,
all, it just affected every industry. And it was something that constantly, that we had to constantly talk politics, everything. It just kind of rolled, COVID just kind of rolled everything into one big talking subject for us, for going on, man, it's been 8 months, 9 months now,
right.
almost. Wow. Yeah.
And we're still talking about COVID.
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
we're going to be talking about COVID.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yes.
let's look at this a little bit. When we've had some sports that have somewhat successfully had seasons.
Hmm.
From a pro level, we've had the NFL has somewhat successfully had a season. NBA did a great job with their bubble.
Yes.
NHL, baseball, they, definitely a shortened season. We go down to
Hmm.
the NCAA and college level, and it's a mess. It's a
Oh.
mess. So, one of the things that we've learned is the difference between pro and amateur sports.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, what do you think? Do you think we had a real season? Did we have
I
real
mean,
seasons?
well, me and you both said early on that we knew, because of the dollars, the revenue, that the colleges would get affected or be affected more than the pros, just simply because of revenue. The NFL and all the pro sports getting more of their revenue from TV than college, which,
Right.
depended a lot upon fans being in the stands. So we knew that it could affect the testing, because of again, the money. The NFL
Mhm.
has the money to do the rapid testing. as Doc R was saying, there's all these different type of tests where you can get a test that'll let you know in 15 minutes, and just a different type of test that they were able to get. And I don't know if that translated down to the collegiate level, because you had outbreaks, you had teams. Right now, Deb, we're in the bowl season, and you having teams right now still canceling going to bowl games because they're having outbreaks on their team. So we kind of knew it would get affected by the revenue. The almighty dollar would play a big, big role in how some of these teams or some of these organizations were going to be able to continue throughout the year. So it has played its role, and I think it's going to continue to play a role, because now with the vaccine being out and who's going to be in line to get the vaccine, it's just different things that you kind of keep hearing coming out each and every day from both leagues, collegiate and from the pro leagues.
Well, I think one of the other things COVID has really exposed is the inequities and social justice issues. And I when I say social justice issues, from Black Lives Matter to other social justice, to the inequities, the rich, poor, sports versus non-sports. Should the NFL player, or should someone playing on a professional sports team, get the vaccine before my daughter, the teacher?
You're right. Well, at least the NBA with their commissioner, Adam Silver. Yes, he was very strong about the NBA not jumping ahead. He said that we would not, as a league, jump ahead and try to get vaccines for our people. To me, that's very responsible. And really, to be honest with you, he's the only one that I heard come out strongly about that. I didn't hear Beckman. I didn't hear Roger Goodell. I can't think of the hockey guy, but
Manfred
Manfred, that's right. You're exactly right. So, it's unbelievable, how strong, but I guess it's directly correlated to the success that they had in the bubble, which I don't know if the NFL is finding the same success there, because again, if you take the Detroit Lions, first team where you had your coaching staff pretty much wiped out by COVID contact. Not to say, and from what I heard, it was one of the coaches that without a mask, doing things that he shouldn't have did, and he put the other coaches in a situation where it was the COVID contact. Not to say that they had it, but they were in close contact with somebody that had it. So, again, where does that start at there? Where does the line get drawn? I mean, because again, you have a social responsibility or a moral responsibility as a person, right? If you've had it, you've been in contact with somebody, that you have to let people know. But then again, you got some of these coaches that aren't following protocol.
Well, you said it yourself when we were talking earlier, self-inflicted wounds from the players, the coaches, everybody's invincible. We're not going to get it. We're all being safe.
Yes.
Or we think we're all being safe. And then you hear the horror stories.
Yes.
18-year-old kids dying, Benny Napoleon. Oh my gosh.
Oh, that was so sad. Just so sad. Such a prominent figure in our community for years and years. Such an important person to leave us at 65. That was really sad. It really was.
We've had Herbert Kane. I mean, it's just been it's unbelievable to me how COVID has completely changed the world.
Yes.
Getting back to the commissioners, I think one of the things that we've seen is the fact that how a commissioner and how the top down really affects the outcome. I have to give so many kudos to Adam Silver. I mean, what a phenomenal job. He was the first one out. He created a bubble when we didn't know, we didn't have a vaccine. He created a way for the NBA to play, and he was very, very strict with that.
He
And
really was. You're right. And
it worked.
with social justice too. I
Yes.
think they, out of all the leagues, I think the NBA did the best job of promoting social justice, letting their individual guys be their voices. And I just thought while they were in that bubble, I thought they did a phenomenal job. And you could see it carrying on. You could just see those guys that carried on from the bubble, them getting a champion. And now into this new season, you still see it carrying on. And you're right. He's a commissioner that I think every other commissioner needs to model themselves after.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the good and the bad, and we've seen, some who've been stumbling more than others. We won't, say who or what, but
Right.
I think Adam Silver definitely deserves kudos. I think also athletes have really stepped up to show that they have a social responsibility, from the get out and vote, Black Lives Matter. Any comments on that for this year?
Yeah, I mean, again, and right, me and you, one of our episodes where me and you actively took part in a social Black Lives Movement march. We actually walked and protest, and it was so proud. I felt so proud that they're walking next to you.
That was one of my favorite episodes.
It really was, and just to see the people, and it was peaceful. It wasn't, I guess protest is the wrong word to use, because it was a peaceful march, just demonstrating, the injustices that, people just not gonna stand for. And just to see whites and blacks and Hispanics and just old, young, it was just, it was just great for us all to get together, and it was for all one cause, and it was a great cause.
And the police were right there. I have a great picture of you shaking hands with the chief of police, and they were all part of it.
Yes,
everybody was part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this has been a really, really fascinating year. I mean, we've had so many issues.
Yeah, we have. So Dale, let me ask you this. So looking forward, and again, I look at some of the things that are coming out. For instance, one of my sticking points right now is with the vaccine rollout.
Yes.
Again, our government promised that they would have 20 million people vaccinated by the end of this year. Well, the end of this year is in a couple of days.
We're a tenth of that.
Exactly. And you're right. We're nowhere near close to that. So how do you see this rolling out? Do you see us? I mean, what do you see? What problems do you see with this rollout, or what did you see that potentially caused the delay or for us not hitting the numbers in the vaccination that our government said that they wanted to have out?
Oh, that is a loaded question.
I know. That's what we do on SportsSlaw. We load.
Yes, we loaded question. Well, I think to start, we were alternative. Let's just say that we weren't exactly able to pinpoint what we could do. We didn't know. I mean, when we talked to Dr. Anna Durbin, one of the things that she said was, we can get the vaccine, and we've done this. We've got the Project Warp Speed. She said, the very first time we talked to her, she said, our big problem is going to be distribution. Don't have the means to distribute. And we are not distributing. I remember as a kid, all of us lining up and getting vaccinated at school. Well, that would be great, except that we're not in school, so we can't do that. And we're talking about a vaccine for ages 16 and up and a vaccine for ages 18 and up. But we're not doing any of the things that we really need to do. When we talked to Lance Gable, he was talking about the government powers and what the government can ask you and force you to do. So I think from a going forward standpoint, we really, really need to work on our distribution channels. And it's double. It is double the problem, simply because the vaccines that we have out there, the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines, require 2 shots.
Mm-hmm.
So getting one isn't going to solve the problem.
Right.
In fact, they've already had one nurse who had it, who got the vaccine and then tested positive for COVID a week later.
Wow.
So so we've got double the issue that we have, in addition to the fact that the vaccines, one of them requires such cold storage. The Pfizer vaccine requires such cold storage. So I don't know, what do you see going forward?
Again, I just think, like you said, I just think the government is going to have to step in. If they have the ability to step in and to kind of force, or not force, but step up, the mass vaccinations, or, however they have to do it. I think that they have to, don't we have this emergency? Isn't it some type of emergency?
We have an emergency act
exactly.
that we could use to make more vaccines. I mean,
okay.
we don't have enough we don't have enough product to vaccinate the country and to achieve herd immunity. And at the current pace that we're going, it's going to take 10 years.
Wow.
That's what they're saying. So we've got to do something, but we can't force people to have vaccinations. We can't even make them wear masks.
Yes. And there, from talking to our doctors, they both said even when you do vaccinate, you still have to wear a mask. You still have to mask up. You still have to do the distancing, the physical distancing, not the social distancing, but the physical distancing. Because again, you're right. You still can be asymptomatic. You can still not show signs, and you can still spread it. So again, some of the simple things, like you saying, just masking up is going to have to still be done even after people being vaccinated. That's something that we're going to have to really, I think, should be required. I don't think it should be a choice. I don't think people should be given a choice about that. I think each state should be working along the same lines. And if there was one law that could be pushed down from the government down to require all the states to do that, then I think it should be done like that.
Well, which points out another thing. We have states' rights, and we have states. When you are in Michigan, you are dealing with a completely different set of laws and rules and regulations than when you go to Ohio or when you go to Florida. And what you're going to see in one state is going to be different than the other. So I think one of the other things we've seen about 2020 is just how politicized science has become.
Yes.
I don't quite know how to say that.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that a virus was a Republican or a Democrat.
That's new to me too. You're so right about that. You're right. But that's what happened in 2020. It became so politicized. It became just such a big political, I don't know, just...
It's amazing that it has.
The politics. Yeah, it drove the politics to a certain standpoint. It really, really did. You're right about that.
Remember when we were talking about Colin Kaepernick and kneeling? And that was the big NFL issue. And now that was, Colin finally is being, lauded for what he did and the fact that he stood up for something like that. And COVID is the big issue.
Yes.
It's amazing what a year or 4. He started in 2016, I believe.
Yep, it was 4 years. You're absolutely right. And again, he did what he did, but he did it peacefully. He did it the right way. But then all of a sudden it was just turned. And, like you said, it just became this big, just a big political, I don't know what to say about it. It was just wrong.
It's amazing how sports and politics mesh, isn't it?
It really is.
It really is, because, and now we've seen science and politics mesh. So 2020 has been an interesting year for all of these reasons.
Yeah. And kind of getting back to what you were saying too about how things are different. how some things have been made a little easier now
Mhm.
that we can connect with each other, even though we're doing it virtually and everything, just like how it changed sports. Again, from how people are not allowed to go watch sports, or just a small number of people allowed to watch sporting events.
Mhm.
And I know in the beginning, Deb, I think, and I know for myself, I thought that it would be a boom for the networkers, for
Yes.
the broadcasters. I thought this was going to be their
We talked
time.
about that.
Absolutely, didn't we? But it was a complete opposite. And I'm trying to figure out, because remember, we seen all the ratings drop in
Yes.
every sport, not just one sport. It dropped across the board in every sport.
Hmm. Yeah, NFL actually did better than any of the other big four
Mhm.
sports, except for golf, some of the
Mhm.
golf and some of the auto racing, which is really fascinating that, golf became a most watched sport, or
Right.
didn't lose as much revenue. I wonder how much of that was a matter of timing, though, because golf really was one of the first sports back, if you will. And then how much how much did you end up as a broadcaster when you had to look at football, basketball, baseball, hockey, all
True.
all in September? You
True.
I mean, from a sports fan perspective, I think you could have watched TV 24/7 and
You're
had the
right.
radio on with a different game constantly.
You are so right about that. You could have learned about every sport at one particular time just from
Mhm.
watching TV. And we said that, Deb, because remember, they had to, because of the COVID, they had to kind of, try to find spots to where they could get it. And we seen that it was going to be a collision of all the sports. I think one day it was every sport. I think that was pretty
Yes.
much every sport went on in one day. I remember some announcers or listened to some TV people that said that. And, it's just amazing that that happened. But again, it was out of necessity because of, what COVID had did, what COVID had postponed, different things, how people were trying to get their season in. People were trying to make sure that they tried to get it in at their time, but a lot of them couldn't do it. So they, again, money drives a lot of things. And I'm quite sure it drove them to wanting to try to get the season on, or try to do what they could do.
Yep. Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of money in broadcast, there's a lot of money in sports, and we really did see the difference from, I want to say, the professional sports to the collegiate sports we've talked about, but we've also seen it in the high school sports
Yes.
and the youth
Yes.
sports, where a lot of these kids, I mean, at some point, the NCAA has basically said, hey, you can transfer, it's a lost year.
Mhm. You're right.
And we've barely spoken about that. From an
You're right.
NCAA perspective, the name, image, likeness, the fact that we're now
Yes.
talking about pay for play. And the Supreme Court just took a case. They're going to hear the Alston case, which is all about the pay for play, and it's couched as an antitrust case. But that's huge. That's going to change
Yeah.
everything. In any other year, that would be the big news.
Yeah, you're right. So do you think this has put things on a level playing field, or do you still think the big schools, the Stanfords, the Floridas, the U of M's, you still think they're going to be head and above some of the smaller programs? Or do you think it might be an even field now that, again, Dale, because now if I'm an athlete now, I don't necessarily have to be in front of that person signing autographs. I can possibly do something virtually.
Right.
Real quickly, the University of Florida, a friend of mine, Josh Bryant, who started FanGauge. And what FanGauge is an app that you can sign, got virtually. They could sign autographs. They don't have to, they could be at their house, they could be anywhere. All they have to do is have an iPad or a phone, and they could sign their autographs.
Oh,
And
I'd love to talk to him. Let's get him on.
yeah, we will get Josh on, because
I want to
again,
talk to
because
Josh.
he has taken off there. Before the
Sure.
pandemic, he had nobody. He had no clients. Since the pandemic, he has 80 events with the Super Bowl that he's doing for the NFL.
Wow.
He's done NBA teams. He got hockey teams. He has baseball teams because, again, he has some collegiate teams because this is a way.
Okay, here's your commercial. Here's your commercial. Yeah. Engage.
We got you in, Josh. But yeah, it's just going to change the whole landscape of how these athletes. So I'm wondering, does that level out the playing field a little bit for some of these schools that we thought weren't going to be in contention with these big schools, because of these big schools with these big budgets and big marketing things, they're able to do a lot more than some of these smaller schools are.
Well, I think that gets to the whole idea of social media, and social media to a large extent has leveled out the playing field. You can have a small market athlete who's phenomenal on social media, and they're going to get the hits. You could have a big market athlete who's not, and they're not going to get the hits. So it's social media has been really interesting, and I think once we see this name, image, likeness, but remember, from a name, image, likeness, we talk about states' rights and state laws. The states are not the same. So Florida is leading the pack. I mean, California was the first one to pass the law, but it doesn't hit until 2023. Florida's really leading the pack. Michigan was supposed to, but of course we ended up with a COVID situation. And so each state's a little different. And now the NCAA has got, between the NCAA and various congressmen, we have 3 or 4 bills pending right now.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting. And when you throw in the social media, we were talking originally that thinking, oh, somebody's going to be doing a car commercial, a local car commercial. But I think once you start combining and you see broadcast and social media and some of the, and the athletes in the schools, and once we actually have a bill that we can deal with, because I know the NCAA doesn't want to be behind the 8 ball on this one. And right now, to some extent, they really are.
Right.
Because states have already passed it, and they have to, you're going to have to play ball. You can't say that we're amateurs anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, shame on the NCAA anyway for, monopolizing and doing some of the things they've done for all these years before. Again, I've always felt that the athlete should have an opportunity to, make something off of their name likeness. They, to me, I felt the NCAA could have set up something in the past where it might have prevented a lot of this, but
hindsight is always 20/20.
Yeah.
But again, we look at the history of the NCAA, and we'll do something on that. One of the other things that I think is really fascinating from this are women's sports and how women's sports are changing. We talked to Don Riley. We've talked about women's sports. We've talked about Title IX. Title IX is taking quite a hit in this, because if we don't have the revenue, we talk about, again, from a collegiate standpoint, we don't have the broadcast revenue. We don't have the ticket sales. We can't get together. We're losing revenue. We have to cut sports. Where do we cut sports? What's going to be cut? And then we have Title IX saying you have to have equal opportunity for the men and the women, or the underrepresented and the overrepresented sex, whichever that happens to be at that particular school. Usually it's men, women, football versus the rowing team.
Right.
So Title IX's.
Well, that's a great point that you bring up, because looking at this, and we got the football championship coming up in college. Yes. And it was a real debate about Ohio State getting in after only playing 6 games. All the other teams, the other 3 teams that are in, I think they played between 12 and 13 games. And Ohio State only played 6 games, but yet
and we changed the rule to let them in, because
exactly right. Why, Deb? But why do you think we changed that rule? Don't you think
because we knew that was the only way that we were going to make any kind of good showing based on our teams?
Exactly right. And the conference, they stand to make millions of dollars. So if the Big Ten would have been left out of this equation, then the Big Ten, they talk in upwards of, these teams can make $20, $30 million, and probably more and everything. So it was a push for the Big Ten. I think Kevin Warren, the commissioner of the Big Ten, remember they came out and said, we're going to stick to our plan. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. We're going to have so many games. If they can't play it, then so be it. But then I think they started looking at that bottom line and the revenue that they were going to possibly lose out on. And they were like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I think we better change up a few things so we could get an opportunity to get into that. And lo and behold, with 6 victories or 6 games played, Ohio State was able to get into
and
that.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I think that's a good decision, because without that revenue and without that money, we would be cutting sports even more than we already have been.
I agree.
And so I don't disagree with it. I know we want to stick to our guns. We want to say, mom or dad, this is, if you don't get dessert if you don't eat dinner. But
that was a good one there, Deb.
Thanks. Okay, we are running out of time here, so I'm going to ask you. I know. We just keep going.
Yeah.
Just keep going. So I'm going to ask you, what is the biggest issue facing sports in 2021, in your opinion?
I think the biggest issue coming into a season next year is going to be if we're not properly vaccinated, or the majority of the nation or our people aren't vaccinated, then how are these teams going to get together? How is it going to ever look like it looked before the pandemic of 2020? I just think that's the biggest thing. From talking to numerous players, their biggest thing has been preparation. Their preparation for the season was all thrown off.
Yes.
Guys couldn't go to the gym and lift. They couldn't get together as a team. I remember Matthew Stafford saying that they were kicked off a high school field because, again, he tried to get some of the guys together and, of course they were trying to social distance, but again, it was protocol in there. So my biggest thing is the quality of the sports moving forward. How is that going to look without the guys being able to properly get prepared for a season, be it baseball, basketball, hockey, whatever? How does the preparation look? And even from a coaching standpoint, those guys talked about the barriers that they had having to teach over line, or teach virtually, not being able to see these guys until they got together, was so hard on a lot of those coaches. So I'm thinking the quality of sports, how is that going to look moving ahead there for me?
I think they need to talk to Dr. Zach Rourke and get his training. And Perfect World Hockey, another commercial out there.
Yeah. You're right. So what do you think? What do you think going to be the biggest thing coming into 2021?
I think the biggest thing that we're going to see is the fact that sports have truly changed. I think we're going to see changes everywhere, changes from a broadcast standpoint. I doubt as a broadcaster that you're going to be flown all over the place anymore, because we found that we can, take you to a single studio. We can do that. I think we're going to see how we're dealing with stadiums. I know we've had a lot of big stadiums that have been built and they've been empty. So is that going to work? I agree with the preparation, but I think really overall, the biggest issue for 2021 is still going to be COVID.
Yeah.
And the changes it's made in sports. And I'm going to say it's not all bad. Some of it is actually going to be good. I think we're going to have new training methods. Again, shout out to like Perfect World Training. I think we're going to see more. We're going to actually recognize our frontline workers and recognize some of those people who are cleaning the equipment and cleaning the locker rooms and cleaning more and hopefully paying them more. We're going to start seeing differences in broadcast. And it may not be good for the airlines, but I think we're going to see some good changes.
Yeah. Can I say this too, Deb? What I've noticed too, and now with gambling becoming legalized now, actually
forgot about gambling.
Yeah, they said that they did their biggest month was last month. They did the
Yeah.
biggest month of gambling. And do you think that's the direct correlation with the pandemic, with the COVID-19? Do you think those two have anything to do with each other? Why last month or this month is going to be some of the biggest months for sports betting?
I don't know. That's a tough question because, and I shouldn't say this out loud, but in my sports law class, we always do a little bit of a March Madness thing. And
Okay.
I have never had ever, since I've been teaching since 2003, never had people who haven't gambled basically on sports.
Mm.
So I think the fact that it's legal, we're picking up those people who are now admitting it and seeing more of it.
Mm.
And I don't know that it's because of COVID, but I think we're a nation of gamblers. I mean, let's face it, billions and billions of dollars on gambling.
It's unbelievable, Deb, the type of money. I mean,
yes, we're going to bet on what color the jerseys are going to be. We're going to bet on, how he ties his shoelaces. We're going to bet on, anything. And we're good at it.
So with that, and like you like to tell me, that opens up other things, right? Doesn't that open up the Pandora box on other things? For instance, when we talk about insiders' knowledge.
So it
just
we've got a whole other one on that one. We've got a great debate we'll be posting pretty soon on gambling, on sports gambling between Lomas, me, and our two interns, LeVar and Rocky.
Yes, that I think that's going to be a big thing, and I'm hoping, I'm quite sure that the higher ups have thought about that, but I don't know if they dug all the way deeply down and thought about all the ancillary things that's going to come off of this.
Well, I will tell you, 2021 is going to be an interesting year.
Yes,
it's going to be an interesting year. We're going to be dealing with COVID. We're going to be dealing with name, image, likeness. We're going to be dealing with the Alston case before the Supreme Court. We are going to be dealing with gambling. We're going to be dealing with the NCAA and the transfer portal.
That's right.
I'm looking forward to it. There'll be lots to talk about.
Yes, it is 2021. So, okay. So what's I need one thing. Well, we already talked about one thing, but what one thing are you looking forward to in 2021? You accomplishing in 2021? What one thing? If it's one thing that you want to get accomplished, what is it?
Learning how to teach online.
Yeah. You sound like Wendy.
I have a class starting, and if I can master Zoom, I'll consider myself accomplished.
Yes.
How about you?
For me, it's going to be getting better at watching the game on TV and commenting about that game, because like you said, it seems like this is going to be the way that we're going as far as, telecasting games and commenting and broadcasting games. It seemed like it's going to be all electronic, because it seemed like it made a world of difference, and it probably saved the networks a whole bunch of money doing it that way. Yep.
And with that, now that you're listening to two workaholics who are looking to accomplish something for work. So thank you, everybody, for tuning into SportsSlaw. Check us out on sportslaw.com. We've got a great new website, and check us out on SoundCloud and hopefully on Spotify soon.